This right here is the very first Viper. In fact, it was introduced in 1989. This is the first mule. That's crazy because you can look at this car and you can draw a direct line all the way over to that car, which is the latest model.
Yep.
And you've been at the company the whole time. So
Yep.
did you ever think when you were designing this car that would eventually lead to a supercar with 640 horsepower?
Back in 1989 when I was working on this thing, I thought this was going to be something that we'd do for a couple years and it would go away and that would be the end of it. I could have never dreamed that 22 years later, here I am still with these cars at 640 horsepower when we struggled to make 400 out of the same basic geometry back then. So it's been a heck of a career for me and a very rewarding career, and like I said, I never would have imagined.
Oh, you had a beard?
Yeah, I had a beard. So that was right after we finished the car. You can see the date.
Yeah.
1989 VMO1.
That's crazy. Look at that.
So that's the team without the names. These were a couple of cars over in Europe. This was swapping an engine out in Numac.
Yeah.
In one of the cars. This is a shot back in 1991 at the short lead press show for the car then.
Was that Jay Leno?
Yeah.
Yeah? Was he with the car?
Yeah, this is Zora Duntov.
Yeah.
Denise McCluggage,
Yeah.
Dan Gurney, Parnelli Jones, Matt Bucheski, James Garner, Shelby, Phil Hill,
Wow.
George Falmer, Sam Posey, Augie Paps, and Jerry Grant. And they all came to a dinner for the car at Phil Hill's shop in Santa Monica.
Now, Dick, you were around when this car was built.
I was the development engineer at Team Viper when this car was built. I've got a bunch of pictures of me with more hair and a beard working on this car back in 1989, yep. It was made to sell the program, really, because it was Lutz's baby, and Iacocca hadn't really bought into the whole thing yet. So we had to put together a prototype car that we could do some dynamic work. Mainly, this car was really used to try to determine some of the suspension geometries and things like that, since at that time we really didn't have a V10 engine yet. We knew it wasn't going to be representative from a power standpoint, but the V8 engine that we had was the intention to be about the same weight as the V10 in aluminum would be. So this car, again, served very well as a dynamics mule for the program. And then when it was completed, Bob Lutz took it out on Oakland Avenue in Highland Park and drove it around with Roy Schoberg, who was our chief engineer at the time, and said, yep, you guys get it, because this car really was what he had in mind for a throwback to the Chevy.
All right, now you got to debunk the myth that the current Viper has a truck engine.
Yeah, that's certainly a myth, because at the time when we were tasked to build the car, Bob Lutz wanted it to be a V10, and Francois Gasteng, our executive vice president for engineering, they wanted something different and unique for the car, and the V10 gave it that, something that nobody else had. And the thinking was, well, gee, we've got this truck V10 engine that we're developing for our truck fleet. We could just use the same engine for the Viper. Well, you know, at first that sounds good, but that truck engine weighed around like 900 pounds. It was
crazy
really heavy, and it just wasn't a good fit for the car at all because of the weight. So we knew that we had to go out and get an aluminum version that was all aluminum, at least a couple hundred pounds lighter, and something that made more power as well, because the truck engine really wasn't designed for power, more for torque and so forth. So at the end of the day, really everything on the engine was changed. The bore centers were changed. The only thing really in common that it had with the truck V10 was the fact that it was a 90-degree V. And in retrospect, even if we'd had freedom to change that V angle, it probably really didn't make sense, because You stand up the V with a 72 degree to make it an even firing V10, and it gets taller. You can't get it under the hood. So it really worked out well. But my point being, there really wasn't anything in common between the truck V10, and there never was really, other than an original, hey, we can use a V10.
Now, how many of these did you sell? Do you remember the first year?
The first year it was something like 220,
So not a lot.
like that. Very, very low volume, because we really didn't start building the things down in Newmac in Detroit until I think it was around, well, it was right around Christmas, but it was a very slow ramp up and everything went fairly slow, so very low volume.
And where did the name come from? Do you recall?
Yeah, when they originally thought about doing this new supercar, I know it was Bob Lutz and Francois Gastang and I think Tom Gale and probably a couple others sitting around in a meeting talking about the car. And again, the idea was a throwback to the old Cobra. So I don't know who exactly it was. I was talking to Francois just the other day about this, as a matter of fact, and he said somebody came up with the idea, well, what about, actually I think it was Francois that came up with the idea.
What about Viper?
He said, well, in France we call poisonous snakes vipers, so what about Viper? And that's kind of how it stuck. That's how it got started.
All right, so you've been working on it for 24 years, if I did my math right. Or maybe longer, probably, because
well,
this is
I started
89.
in April of '89 on
Yeah.
Viper, so that's 23 years.
23 years. So what's your favorite part of the car? I mean, and
Well,
it's pretty much stuck.
The engine, of course. I mean, the engine's the heart of the car. What else could there be? I tell everybody that the car is just some place to put my engine. That's all it is.
And last question. What do you think the Viper will be 24 years from now, or 23?
Boy, you know, I don't know these days. It's the world is certainly changing, but there's still a place for cars like this. People still want their toys, and they're so much fun. They're such a great thing to drive. But 24 years from now, anybody's guess.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. That car kind of at a press or a management review.
Yeah. That's a Colorado.
One of these cars is that blue car right there. That's me.
That's a Colorado.
Remember that? Well, that's Zion in Utah.
Okay.
That's in Utah.
That's the best picture of all.
That's me, Schoberg and Lutz.
The differential is locked. The heated steering wheel is not helping, and we are completely stuck. I'm going to try a little bit of momentum, see if that gets us over it, but we're just at the start of this trail. I've already done this twice now because we've hit the bottom of this car. I'm going to try it one more time, but I don't want to destroy this. There's an Armada behind us, Nissan Armada. Here we go.